Isn't it refreshing when design form and function meld into an inspired synergy? Many of you may not have heard of J. Porter Studios, and after hearing the standmount creation from engineer-designer Jeremy Porter, I've got a sneaking suspicion that's about to change. Today we're looking at a product that genuinely surprised me. The J. Porter Studios Waterloo Micro packs a whole lot of speaker into a small package. This sealed three-way stand-mount loudspeaker packs a punch and is worth a listen for anyone considering options around the $6,000 mark, as the Waterloo Micro sneaks in at $5,995 a pair US. So stay tuned while I share what I heard when listening to the J. Porter Studios Waterloo Micro. J. Porter Studios is an Austin, Texas-based loudspeaker manufacturer, and even though I live in Austin, I found out about these speakers from Steve Guttenberg's channel at After Axpona 2025, where Jeremy Porter made his Axpona debut. The Waterloo Micro comes in at 13 inches high, 9¼ inches wide, and 11 inches deep, and weighs right around 25 pounds. So I would say it solidly falls into the camp of a medium-sized stand mount. The cabinets are constructed from all Baltic birch hardwood and finished with an elegant American walnut veneer, accented by black front and rear baffles. The fit and finish definitely suggest a product punching above its weight class. Okay, reviewer sidebar. It's difficult for me to judge how important things like speaker terminals are for the average consumer, as you're likely to only interact with them once or twice. But as a reviewer, when this is done well, it makes my heart sing. And really, if you think about it, as a speaker designer, other than placement, this is the only tactile interaction your customers will have with your product. So why not take some time and make it a good experience? Well, Porter did just that. The speaker cable binding posts were the first thing he designed for the Micros. In the weeks while he stewed over the design of the speaker itself, he chiseled away at a remarkably elegant solution to binding posts for what would become his first passive speaker design. Large enough to get some good torque, there's an outer ring for clamping onto the spade or bare wire, and then an inner fitting that locks it down and secures the whole connection. Okay, sidebar over, these are just so nice I really needed to mention them. The most obvious feature of the Waterloo Micro is its architecture. The speaker cabinet was designed with very few parallel surfaces to eliminate standing waves within the enclosure. The unique geometry ensures no two panels share dimensions in size or shape, virtually eliminating internal standing waves. This focus on cabinet inertness and acoustic neutrality highlights that Jeremy Porter primarily pursued functional viability, and I personally think it also works aesthetically. The Waterloo Micro is a sealed three-way design. The complement of drivers consists of a 1-inch ceramic tweeter, a 6-inch ceramic mid-range, and a 9-inch glass fiber woofer. The speaker has a 4 ohm impedance with an efficiency of 87 dB at 1 volt at 1 meter, and J. Porter Studios publishes the frequency response as plus or minus 2 dB from 80 Hz to 22 kHz. While that bottom end number might raise an audiophile's eyebrow, my measurements confirmed an in-room response that reached below 40 Hz, at which point it was only 5 dB down. For my audition, streams were sourced from my Roon server running through a DCS Lena streaming DAC and master clock. Power was supplied by my reference Hagel H190V integrated amplifier and conditioned using an AudioQuest PowerQuest 303. Ethernet was switched through an English Electric 8 switch, and for speaker wire, I used my Via Blue SC6 Air cables. Okay, so what does all this mean when it comes to how the speaker performs? This speaker is a Goliath when it comes to imaging. In my listening room, the speakers are arranged on the room's long wall, and the image presented by the Waterloo Micros regularly projected feet beyond my front wall and a foot or so in front of the speakers. As a reviewer, one of the benefits to having a thoroughly treated room, although there's always room for improvement, is that the presentation of the sound space is almost entirely dependent on the data the speaker is able to directly present to the ear. Here, the Waterloo Micros again excelled. Nearly every recording I listened to was presented with space around the musicians that sounded remarkably congruent with the music they were playing. This leaves for real excitement, as the room around me would transform from a cavernous medieval cathedral to a well-appointed symphony hall, or an outdoor stage with a crowd cheering around me. Back to the sound stage itself, individual performers were clearly presented on that stage without sounding separate, leaving for a noteworthy level of believability. In this regard, the Waterloo Micros were quite engaging. Getting into tonal characteristics, with the bottom end beginning its roll-off at 80 Hz, the lack of bass extension is the only thing that hints at this speaker being a stand mount. The sound the Waterloo Micros produce is just so big. Even here, the roll-off is remarkably subtle, which allows the speaker to fill in a bit of the body that's found in this range. Although this means that when listening at lower levels, there wasn't enough energy for the bottom end to have a lot of punch. When I'm not listening analytically, I play quite a bit of electronic music, which means I'm inclined towards all the bass extension I can get, so long as it's tight and coherent. That said, even with its limited extension, due to the natural laws of physics, the Waterloo Micros didn't leave me wanting in the bottom end, like so many bookies do. Porter left enough meat on the bone at this end of the spectrum, and with the sealed cabinet design he's implemented on the Waterloo Micros, the bass that was there is well composed and impactful. As we work our way up in frequency, I was quite surprised when I initially looked at the measurements I took, as there was a noticeable dip on the graph around 180 Hz. However, upon further inspection, the only reason this dip was noteworthy is because it was contrasted on an otherwise nearly flat plot. So a 3 dB dip upon immediate inspection looks suspect. And at any rate, fluctuations in measurements below 200 Hz in my room can hardly mean the speaker is to blame. With my room's size and the level of treatment, the Schrader frequency sits just below 200 Hz. Furthermore, the whole reason this caught me by surprise is that my listening notes didn't indicate any sort of distracting dip in this range. Kick drum was impactful and rhythmic, snare was full of body, and male vocals were clear and distinct, not sounding recessed whatever. In fact, on Gregory Porter's Hey Laura from his album Liquid Spirit, the upright bass is rendered as articulate and with appropriate heft, and the lion's share of Porter's range sits right in this area between 80 and 500 Hz, where there was no hint the Waterloo Micros were hiding anything. As we continue up in frequency, the relatively flat response trends upward ever so slightly. This upward trend presents female vocals as forward in the mix, although when presenting an ensemble, no one section stands proud of the rest. This upward trend is arrested just below the 2 kHz mark. The drop here is minor and doesn't begin a true roll-off until north of 10K. The output in this shelf above 2K is attenuated just enough to take the edge off of what can sometimes become a piercing treble on lesser equipment, without taking away from the detail and airiness needed to render instruments' timbral clarity. Looking at what the Waterloo Micro is, there's not much to criticize here. As if it weren't expected after a lead-in like that, here I go. If there is one thing I could call out, it's just before that dip right around 2K. As I previously mentioned, up until that point, there was a subtle trend up, meaning the 1 to 2 kHz range can bring a little heat. Again, when an entire ensemble is performing, this is so subtle it's hardly noticed, and it never became fatiguing for me. However, on pieces with solos of instruments that have fundamentals that sit here, in the case with clarinet, the instrument sounded ever so subtly metallic. Honestly, this was so subtle that I'm pretty sure the only way an untrained ear would hear it as such is one of two scenarios. You are A, being the Waterloo Micros with speakers going for 10x their price, and even here some manufacturers don't nail this, or if someone was playing a clarinet right in front of you. I really must take that analytical hat off here. Actually, all my hats off to Jeremy Porter for being able to design and produce such a compact speaker that can hold its own when compared to many floor standards garnering much higher prices. If space is a premium for you, you have to add the J. Porter Studios Waterloo Micros to your must-hear list. With clear articulate sound and wide bandwidth performance from a bookshelf speaker, this was a wonderful surprise in my listening room. An imaging champ that left me enveloped with engaging music meant enjoyment track after track. I hope you'll check out what Jeremy has to offer at jporterstudios.com or follow him on Instagram at jporterstudios. Thanks for sticking around, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. It's free. And I hope you enjoyed this review. And remember, don't forget to make listening fun again.